On today's episode.
What do we most neglect as Christian citizens? I'll just say in America, but I think it's generally true for everyone, but it's trust. Trust in God. We let events or pundits or politicians or influencers make us afraid, and then we forget that God's in control, no matter who's in office or what he or she is doing or deciding. And either or, might be, at the same time, we think and act as though everything is up to us and that the nation will fall and Christianity will be condemned unless we do X or Y, and we get all the other Christians in the country to also do X and Y. And again, forget that God's in control. Welcome to the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Our world today presents people with complicated issues of life and death, marriage and family, health and science. It can be a struggle to understand or deal with them. We're here to help by bringing good information and a fresh biblical perspective to these matters and more. Join us now for Life Challenges.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Krista Potratz, and I'm here today with Pastors Bob Fleischman and Jeff Samuelson. And today we have a very special episode for you. We are going to talk about America and the 250th anniversary. I think it's got some really fun name. What is it?
That whole long. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's the one that I think has been most settled on is the semi-quincentennial.
Okay.
It can also be called the sesquicentennial, and there's another one that's even less common. It's like sesquicentennial or something like that. But basically, it's a fancy Latinate way of saying 250 years.
Yeah. And, we've done a lot of episodes on America and just different things here, too. But just thought, especially like with the 4th of July and this big anniversary type of day, to also just revisit some of these things that we've talked about before, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jeff, Bob, can you give us a little maybe introduction here as to this celebration?
That'd be a good Jeff thing. He's the poli-sci guy here.
Okay, well, if you count back 250 years from this year, you get to 1776. And it was in 1776 that the Continental Congress gathered in Philadelphia, signed the Declaration of Independence. We celebrated as July 4th. I believe the actual date, getting really technical about it, is the 2nd, but it doesn't really make that much difference. It's something to celebrate. And this was something that was not done lightly. I think it's perhaps helpful to remember that this was after we'd already been fighting with the British for a while. And there was still a lot of resistance. Should we really be doing this? This is an awfully big step. And it took a while of some years of war for the American colonies to finally say, this can't continue. The only way out from this conflict that we have is through independence. And I don't know how many people would be aware of this. There is actually a bit of a controversy, mostly on the right these days in America, about whether it's proper to talk about America as a belief, or that we're a nation unlike others and that we're founded on a creed, not creed in like the Christian sense, but creed in the sense of a set of beliefs that set us apart. These are the things that we are all committed to. But it's really something, because the Declaration of Independence for a long time wasn't really considered the foundational seminal document for America that we look at it as now. It was the Constitution that was the more important thing. But largely, a lot of it actually had to do with Abraham Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address, really raising up the Declaration of Independence. This is what we believe. This is what it means to be American. And so those values, those beliefs, those principles became the thing that changed us as a nation in many ways, identified us as a nation. And because of that, it's had a lot to do with the difference that we have made existing in this world of ours. And so, all this, a large reason for why we're celebrating.
It's unique because we'll get into a little bit of the minutia of what it means to be America, but it has raised a lot of questions, especially lately again about Christian nationalism, freedom of religion, the Establishment Clause, and all those kinds of things, and we'll get into that. But we enjoy freedoms in America, and sometimes American patriotism almost becomes a religion unto itself. To be honest, I have a flag waving in front of my house, and it waves out there all the time because there's a lot about America that I love, the ideals. I have somebody else in the subdivision during the month of June had the gay rights flag, the pride flag hanging out there, and okay, so that's what they believe in, and so sometimes we just hang the flag out because it's a cool decoration, and but we're hopefully in this episode we'll talk a little bit kind of what it means now today, for us.
Mhm. One of the areas, maybe just to kind of start with too, is just, I mean, and I think we've kind of talked a little bit about this in the past as well, but how this form of governing is different than what is described in the Bible.
Well, I'd like to start just by affirming what is similar.
Okay, yeah.
And it's the most important way. The powers that be, whether we're talking presidents, congressmen, kings, emperors, or judges or whatever, the powers that be still derive their authority from God. Romans 13:1 says, "No authority exists except by God, and the authorities that do exist have been established by God." That principle stays through no matter what form of government you're talking about, no matter what time there is.
And no matter how good or not good they are.
Yeah.
Even the bad governments, the fact that they're bad is not the fault of God.
Yeah. But the dissimilarities are probably the easier things to point out. If you look at the Old Testament, Israel, there's direct involvement of the Lord in choosing who's going to lead. Whether it's the judges or the kings, or at least choosing the family line from which the kings are going to come. Sometimes even kings of foreign nations, other than Israel. That's not what we have. There's no direct involvement of the Lord in choosing our leaders here in the United States. If you look at the New Testament time, there we didn't see the Lord directly involved in choosing the leaders, but we have a Roman Empire governing everyone, and a Caesar at the top of that, and that's not what we see here in America either. What we have in the U.S. is a representative democracy. It's also called a republic as a form of government, small r Republican government. And this means that the people vote for the leaders who will make the decisions about the nation's laws and policies and practices, and et cetera. A pure democracy would mean that every decision that is made is put to a vote. And that is unworkable. You might be able to do that in a small town, but you can't do that in a nation, especially not one the size of ours or with complex issues that we have to deal with. And in a representative democracy, the leaders that are elected have authority, but in systems like ours, that authority is understood to derive from the fact that they were elected by the people, which means that the power that they express is the people's power, and it's exercised on their behalf. And that's the basic idea of a representative democracy. One last thing there, that the idea of voting, or at least, people getting together to reach some kind of agreement, that does exist in the Bible. So it's not like that is contrary to Scripture. It's just that there are really no situations in the Bible where we see a nation governed by those principles. But if you look in the Old Testament, there are various times where, the people are gathered and, the leader asks, "So what are we going to do about this?" and something like that. And we see some bad examples of that too, with the Sanhedrin voting to convict Jesus, and Pilate asking the crowd, what shall I do with this man Jesus? And they were the loudest, calling to crucify him, so I guess that's what we'll do. That would be a bad example of kind of a democratic impulse. But the mere existence of those things doesn't mean that there's anything contrary to Scripture about the system that we have.
And I think it's important to remember that when we're trying to navigate the challenges of a republic form of governing, that we don't have an exact parallel in Scripture. The Roman government was a representative form of government, but the Jewish people had no voice in that, to speak of. There's more of nobility and so forth, so it was representative on a limited basis. So there is a uniqueness to our form, and I think as we continue to wade deeper into understanding our responsibilities of getting involved and doing things, it isn't like we could point to Second Jude and point, it says Second Jude 3 says that we must be doing this. We're basically applying. And I think Jeff correctly pointed out the number one governing principle is that the government's established by God and even its various forms. And so we accept that.
Mm-hmm. And looking at our form of government that we have, what specific blessing with our government should Christians be especially thankful for? What kind of stands out as something that we as Christians can be thankful for?
This is a really important point because I think it's foundational for so much else as we as Christians think about this. It's thanks. It's about gratitude. It's looking at things that we have as blessings, focusing on that rather than on problems or deficiencies and things like that. I think something that's often not appreciated is simply the fact that our form of government has endured as long as it has. You look all over the world, and there are nations that we look at as, oh yeah, that's a good democratic country or whatever. Oh, how long have they been that way? 5 years, 50 years, maybe 75. Nation of France, I forget what it is. They're on, I don't know, something like their 6th constitution. We would think of them as pretty bedrock of Western values and things like that. And so the mere fact that, our system has endured, and it's not just an accident of history. It's not like, well, we were too lazy to do anything else. No, it's because, I'll say God blessed the people who were designing our system with wisdom in doing that. And so we set something up that's has lasted. We withstood a civil war. Probably the single greatest crisis this nation has ever had to deal with. And with the Union winning that war, it really established that the principles of our democratic republic, they're that much more firmly rooted for us. We said, okay, this was something worth fighting for. That was something worth winning. And now that we've done that, this is who we are. And this is what we're standing for. I think there are also some surprising things. Again, if you compare it to the rest of history and much of the rest of the world, generally when things don't go your way, Americans don't respond with violence.
We're not supposed to.
Yeah. And generally when things do go your way, you don't respond with violence to wipe out the other side, which is, again, pretty common throughout history. There have been no really serious attempts at revolution beyond what we would talk about with the Civil War. And, just simple things. After the Revolutionary War, Europeans looked and they were really surprised that, Washington didn't want to be king. They were even more surprised when he stepped down after 2 terms as president. It's just like, why would somebody do that? And it just showed that there were principles involved that the nation really valued and said, we're going to stick with these.
And I was just going to say, too, that I think it was about a year ago that we had Jolie on the podcast, and your friend Bob from China. And I think, one of the things that really struck me was, I think you even kind of asked her, how do you basically follow the Great Commission and go and make disciples when your government doesn't want you to do that? And so, I think as a Christian, that is really a wonderful thing with our government too, that we do have the ability to do that.
I've often wondered, have we thought deeply about what the government's supposed to be doing? It's interesting because, of course, my reading, my study goes into the area of ethics and future trends and technology and so forth. And there's an incredibly strong, deep financial interest in longevity and so forth. And oftentimes government was designed to sustain people for their lifetime on the earth. And I've sensed over the the last, especially maybe the last half dozen years, that government's beginning to take on more of the nature of truly trying to create heaven on earth. It's we're not just trying to make a safe place for people to live and a prosperous place for people to enjoy, but now we want to make it for a long time. And so you begin to find some bad players in different fields of technology, beginning to choose what are the kind of people we want to endure and what are the kind of people we don't want to endure, which is I've often said that I kind of believe in a cyclical view of history where things tend to keep going around and around and around, but it looks a little bit different because we get more technical about it. So it's maybe not the eugenics during the Nazi period in Germany, but it's a different kind of eugenics. We begin to justify picking and choosing the kinds of people we want and the kind of babies we want and so forth. And we begin to justify it by, well, they wouldn't want to live like that. So we're not going to be so bold as to say a life not worth living, which was a mantra during the eugenics movement during the World War II era, to now saying, well, they probably wouldn't want to live like that. And for Americans, Christian Americans, it puts us at a crossroads. We're going to have to start figuring out what are we still after, what are we trying to hold on to, and then how do you navigate that cycle?
Yeah, another kind of difficult thing to navigate, I think, is Scripture calls us to honor governing authorities, while remembering, though, at the same time that our ultimate citizenship is in heaven. How does that tension really play out for us, when you think about America, and especially America 250 here?
Yeah, there are many different answers to that question. I guess I'll just start by saying I think that one of the challenges of being a Christian in a democracy like ours, particularly if we're politically engaged, is that we're inclined to think, probably more subconsciously than consciously, but we think that, well, if I'm exercising authority when I vote, and I'm voting Christianly, then when people I didn't vote for end up in office, somehow they must be illegitimate because I didn't approve and I did the Christian thing. So if they're illegitimate then for that, then I don't really owe them honor or respect or obedience. And then you end up with Christians, people who call themselves Christians, being disrespectful, being disobedient, and contributing to bad things in society and standing as though they're doing something heroic.
And that's on both sides of the aisle, too.
Yeah. And it's, no, that's not the way the Bible is written. Again, we point out always that, Romans 13, where it talks about, the duty we as Christians owe to the government, that was written under Nero. He was no friend to Christianity. And so duly elected representatives, even if they're just effectively installed, they hold positions in government. And so therefore they are God's representatives, whether I approve of them or not. That doesn't mean everything they're doing is right. That doesn't mean that, I can't criticize it or try to work against it. But the relevant passages in Scripture don't carve out exceptions based on our opinions of who deserves our submission and who doesn't.
Well, we saw that with Jesus when they tried to trap him with, should we be paying taxes? Jesus essentially endorsed giving to Caesar that which is Caesar's, which was going to pay the salaries of the people who are going to execute him. When you think about it, I mean, it's just pretty profound, but that's because he saw a higher principle at work. And that is that you respect those in government, even when it doesn't, like Jeff said, it doesn't turn out your guy. First of all, I like the word Christianly. I'm sure that's in my dictionary somewhere. But we do that a lot. We think that we have thought carefully, we have judged spiritually correctly, and then our guy loses. And especially when the other side has almost, just shy of renounced Christianity or has chosen to go in a different religious route altogether, even when they are elected, they are God's representatives. The fact that they don't know it or acknowledge it is their issue, but our issue is we do know it.
One of the mental exercises that I think is really helpful is when you start thinking in terms of this is the way it should be, think, okay, what would it be like for a Christian living in Pakistan? At least in theory, got a democratic government, but everyone in power is Muslim. You may have certain constitutional rights, but you dare not exercise them in the same way you would as a Christian. And think about, okay, what would I consider proper there? What would my options be in there and things like that? And that does two things. One, it helps give you perspective on the situation here in terms of, okay, what is actually democratic? What is actually Christian here? What are the things that I must do because I'm a Christian? And what are the things that I'm just able to do because I'm a Christian in America? And it also then makes you appreciate that much more what we do have here in the United States, the rights and the privileges and things that are guaranteed to us in our Constitution and such. We appreciate those more. But that perspective, I think, helps us appreciate more what we've got, but it also helps us appreciate more as like, okay, what's the Christian thing here, and what's the citizen part of being an American here? How do those balance or work together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. And, I mean, we've talked too about like how we live in a representative form of government, and there are basic responsibilities that we have and can have like as a Christian citizen. For example, maybe like voting, praying, speaking up. Do you see any of these things, any of these responsibilities that maybe as Christians we often neglect, or maybe don't think that are our responsibilities?
I give this a lot of thought. I'd love to hear from you first, Krista.
Yeah.
From me?
Yeah.
Boy, I guess I think people sometimes just think somebody else is going to do it because we live in a government where anybody can do it, right? Like somebody else will vote for that candidate that I want. Or, we think, oh man, I live like in an area where everybody's going to vote for the other guy. Why would my vote matter? Or something. Or somebody else will speak up about that. Or there's just so much out there already with social media. Why would I contribute to that?
It's kind of like the big church problem.
Yeah. And
when you're in a big church, a lot of people sit back now.
Right. Where it's like, oh, I mean, really, it is our responsibility. And as Christians, we should feel, empowered, emboldened to do those things. But maybe it's like that mob mentality where, yeah, somebody else will do it.
Well, and, like I said, it's like the big church. One of the problems when I was in a small mission church, you knew everybody who needed to be involved. And then you get into a country of, 300 plus million people, you do feel like, who am I? Mm-hmm. We can leave it to somebody else. And yet, I think the answer is oftentimes found in the story of the Good Samaritan. In a representative form of government, you have an opportunity to be a friend to a neighbor in a different way. You actually have a voice. Now, do you use the voice by walking by to the other side of the road, or do you get down and do something? And it's interesting because I am always troubled that people are trying to make governing and everything kind of like a heaven on earth. But at the same time, I think it's wonderful when strong Christians who have good sense, good judgment, run for political office and are willing to navigate the challenges of representing people. My problem is not everybody who aspires to it necessarily have the good judgment. They don't always understand that when I choose to serve a community that's a mixture of Muslims and Christians, or a mixture of Republicans and Democrats, or stuff like that, how to navigate that in a responsible way, in a way that's Christianly. So got to use the word now.
Yeah.
Well, and and that's just kind of a good point too. I think sometimes, we maybe even just put weight on the people we represent, like that those are the people then that have all the power. And, it makes me just think about like somebody like Charlie Kirk, right? Who was not, he didn't represent, not in like a political sense, right? Like he wasn't anybody's senator, governor, that type of thing, but he really seemed to carry a lot of weight politically with the things that he was saying too. So I don't know, just kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I'm really big on Christians, citizens engaging with politics. I think it's something that, if they are able, they should do it.
Are you going to announce a candidacy?
No. But okay. It's something that It's going to vary according to your situation, according to your knowledge, all sorts of things like that. But there's so many things you can do. I mean, just simply saying, oh, this is a matter that concerns me, I'll pray about it. That's engaging with politics. But it can go all the way from that to, getting involved in a campaign. Obviously, your vote, could even be, as Bob talks about, running for office yourself. But I'm going to take a slightly different tack in answering this question about what do we most neglect as Christian citizens? I'll just say in America, but I think it's generally true for everyone, but it's trust in God. We let events or pundits or politicians or influencers make us afraid, and then we forget that God's in control, no matter who's in office or what he or she is doing or deciding. And either or, it might be, at the same time, we think and act as though everything is up to us, and that the nation will fall and Christianity will be condemned unless we do X or Y, and we get all the other Christians in the country to also do X and Y. And again, forget that God's in control. Forget that nothing happens without his knowledge and that he works all things out for the good of his people. Related to this is a sense that, I'll just say, a misuse of the idea of, do you know what time it is? Which is something you may have heard around. It's this idea that, okay, well, this moment right now is unique, that we have to act decisively, even if it means that we set aside all the norms of Christian character or democratic principles or whatever. We need to do that because this moment is unique. Okay, so you're saying that God stepped aside right now or something? It's like, no. So we need to, when we do trust God as Christian citizens, our calmness and our confidence, because we know he's got it. It's not saying we're not going to do anything, but it's saying he's got it. And boy, what a positive witness to the world that is. Everyone else is freaking out. We can stay calm. And it also means we can be that much more effective politically because we're better able to process, to strategize, to communicate when we're at peace and not freaking out ourselves. That allows us to focus better on the bigger picture and on long-term solutions. And as Bob was getting to a little earlier, seeking to serve not just our own people, our own side, but all of the citizens who are all our neighbors whom we are called to love.
Well, and of course, the mantra for Christian living is to honor God in all things. We are created to glorify God. That's Old Testament, Isaiah. Paul says it in 1 Corinthians 10:31. Whether we eat or drink or whatever we do it all to the glory of God. That's to be our focus. So, and I've been in those meetings, with being in a pro-life organization. You get into these deep strategy meetings where, we got to get this candidate in, we got to get this candidate out, we got to introduce this legislation, but we got to do it at the right time. And there's nothing wrong with planning and strategizing and so forth, but a Christian always does so with the preface as God wills. And so I'm seeking to glorify God. I'm seeking to accomplish His will. And I was listening to a podcast about a month ago, and they were talking about the issue of should we post the 10 Commandments, like in classrooms or courtrooms and stuff like that. And I remember the one argument was made. Absolutely. And of course, I'm immediately going, wait, this could be a problem and everything. But he raised an interesting argument. He said, and I've heard preachers make this point too, and that is, everybody's operating with some set of standards. Mm-hmm. And if it's not going to be Christian standards, what standards is it going to be? When I first got involved in the 70s, we always said we followed the Judeo-Christian ethic. It wasn't the Jewish ethic. It wasn't the Christian ethic. It was the Judeo-Christian ethic. It was a set of these common things. Now, if you go into Pritchard's book of laws and regulations, where he talks about other cultures, the Babylonians and the Assyrians and so forth, you'd be stunned to find how some of those same ethics are in those other cultures, about the way you treat your neighbor and that kind of stuff. See, and when you begin to identify that a nation that's founded on some strong Christian or Judeo or solid, sacrificial type ethics, they tend to endure. And, like the United States, I think, has endured because we were founded on some of those same ethics. And the countries that endure are the ones that recognize that some of the basic foundational principles that permeate the Jewish Old Testament and permeate the Christian New Testament. And so you get those that basically, well, can you imagine if a nation actually were founded on a principle that says, I think more of others than I do of myself? Yeah, I mean, it would be a profound thing. And you never had to mention Christ once, other than Christians know that he was the perfect example. But I think a lot of that has been lost over time, especially in these last years. And so, of course, in pendulum swinging, Christian nationalism is trying to, force it one way. And then, of course, the separation of church and state, people are trying to swing it this way, and both sides lose.
I mean, as we wrap up here, any other things that you would like to just mention here?
Well, I want to build off of what Jeff said, and that is you got to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
I still believe in getting involved, but you got to get involved with the understanding that you are not getting involved in the great Christian religion called the United States. You're getting involved in government. Well, it's really no different than church in many ways. You have strong Christians, you have weak Christians, you have people who are there every week, you have people who are hardly there on the holidays. And you've got a nation that way. And I think encouraging people of sound judgment that recognizes you can't be an absolutist, but you can't turn your back on everything that's happening. There's a way you walk it, and sometimes people will disagree. And sometimes the people who disagree will not be nice, but you got to keep doing it. And I have such high admiration. We had Rick Gundrum on a while back, and Rick is a solid Roman Catholic, good friend, personal friend. There's a lot I admire. When he used to tell me when we would get together for lunch or breakfast, and he would tell me the horrible things that were written to him and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, and yet he hung in there. I admire that because I'm not sure I'm that strong. I have to put up with a lot in the position I have, but not like that. And yet those people earn my admiration.
I guess just as my final thought is just a encouragement for us as Christians, as American Christians, to not forget about love. This 250th semi-quincentennial it's okay to love your country. Sometimes there's a message out there, and I think particularly today in certain parts of our polity are saying, this is a horrible country or whatever. It's okay to love your country. You're not loving it because you think you are better or that Americans are better than everyone else. You're loving it because of the way God has blessed you through it. And that's a good thing. But don't forget love in the sense of that's what everything is about for us. Bob mentioned the importance of love for God as it shows through there, but everything we do politically as members of the nation, as Christians, we're doing out of love for our neighbor. If we're fighting against some evil in society, we're fighting against that because there are real people who are being hurt by that evil, and we're loving them by doing that. If we're working to make something better, it's because we want better for our neighbors. We want better for our fellow citizens. It's love for our children who coming after us and all those kinds of things. It's just to keep that front and center as Christians. It helps elevate your attitude toward your nation and gives this celebration that we're about to have a much, much different feel.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you both for this discussion today, and I thank all of our listeners too. And if you have any questions on this, I am sure Bob and Jeff would love to get back to you with all this as well. So, but please feel free to reach out to us anytime at lifechallenges.us. We'll see you back next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Please consider subscribing to this podcast, giving us a review wherever you access it, and sharing it with friends. We're here to help, so if you have questions on today's topic or other life issues, you can submit them, as well as comments or suggestions for future episodes at lifechallenges.us or email us at podcast@christianliferesources.com. You can find past episodes and other valuable information at lifechallenges.us, so please check it out. For more about our parent organization, please visit christianliferesources.com. May God give you wisdom, love, strength, and peace in Christ for every life challenge.